Good day and greetings from the Great White North. My name is Prickly Poo and welcome to day 347 of a year of change. We are going to go backtrack a little bit today. We got some news today. Not really news. I mean, it is sort of news, but it's not anything super surprising. So we'll get into that in a second. To do this, we need to go back a couple of years. A little over 2 years, actually almost exactly 2 years. About a year before I started doing this. Back in February 2014, Canadian Senate decided to sign up this subcommittee to take a look at obesity. And they did the study that went from February of 2014 all the way to June of 2015, and my eyeball is hurting already. Look at that. Look at that, 10 seconds in. There we are. Fine, don't worry. So what they've basically, they took a look at the obesity situation and looked at different ways that they could sort of counteract it, things that would help, things that are causing it, all this other stuff. So anyway, yesterday they came out with their actual report. And that's where I say it's nothing really new. I mean, it's nice that they finally come out with something, but there are a few things that sort of, you went, yeah, okay, that's good. They said, number one, that it is really considered an epidemic. The number of people that have gone just from normal size, well, the number of obese people has doubled since 1980. The number of obese children has tripled since 1980. They looked at sugar intake, saying that was a huge chunk of the main reason why so many people are obese. And we've looked at that extensively. I'm not going to actually look too much into the different causes and everything else and stuff like that. I mean, the short story is they want to take a look at the Canada Food Guide and revamp the whole thing. Because they just said it's incredibly outdated, and it's a really good line that was said by the chairman was actually, I'm going to try to remember this, that they said at best it's inefficient, and at worst it's enabling the obesity epidemic crisis, whatever they said, something like that. Which I thought was a very good line. Very nice. But there are a number of different things that they said, that they need to look at. There's the sugar tax. We talked about that before, so they're sort of revisiting that. A lot of the focus was on the sugar as well. Just the people's lack of activity, just a whole bunch of things that are contributing to it. Basically, the stuff that we've been looking at over the past year. But the thing that really sort of struck me, and this isn't, that's pretty much it. That's the news story. I'll put a link in the description below so you can go and you can take a look at it. But that's pretty much it. So there's nothing really new. But what really struck me was when I was reading the story, it was everybody's reaction to it. And, we've seen the reaction from other people when you say, well, how do you fix people being fat? And usually it's, well, I find that it's the thin people that are going, we'll just put the fork down. Like, we know it's not that easy. But everyone seemed to have not even just really a solution, but an angry solution to the whole thing. There were a lot of people that were saying it was a tremendous waste of time, that they spent, a year looking at this and saying, well, this is ridiculous, and why is my tax money going there? I don't think it's a waste of time. I really don't. If you're going to take a look at something like this, and chances are the funding was minimal for this, if you're going to take a year and say, okay, now we can, follow this obesity problem for a full year, or a year and a half, year and 4 months, roughly, when they were looking at it and saying, we can pinpoint really what the major causes are. We can see, how many people have died in that year. And it turns out it's anywhere between 48,000 and 66,000 per year that are dying from obesity-related issues. Or causes linked to obesity, I think is what they said. So that averages out to around 130 to 180 people a day that are dying. This is just in Canada, by the way. So if you're not in Canada, can't help you. Don't know what your situation is. I'm assuming it's just as bad, if not, better or worse. It's going to be somewhere in there. So we use Canada as an average. So we have about 130 to 180 people dying every single day. And this really is a huge range of ages. This isn't just people that are, they're all in their 40s and 50s, and of course their heart gave out. It's not really like that. We've seen what can happen. And I don't think it takes into account things like bullying and, people committing suicide and people actually just overeating to a point where they choke on their own vomit and all the other fancy ways that we can go. But I think it's really looking at things like heart disease and probably sleep apnea, sleep apnea. All the little things that we've sort of looked at over the course of the year, things that you can look at and definitively say, if you weren't obese, you wouldn't have had that issue. So I think that's what they're really looking at. But again, I don't really know because I didn't delve too deeply into the actual report. But I don't think it's a waste of time for them. Any additional knowledge is good. So if they're willing to fund it, great. go do it. If it leads to something that say, they decide, you know what, we are going to do a sugar tax. It's working in other countries. We're going to do a sugar tax, and, that's going to get passed. Then great, that's going to help. But what really struck me was just everyone's response to it. There were people blaming everybody and everything for the obesity problem. It went from people started saying, well, no, the main reason why everyone is fat is because we don't have phys ed in schools anymore, which is ridiculous. We've looked at that. We know that the exercise portion is a very small part of weight loss. It's going to be helpful, obviously, but I highly doubt that putting that back into the system is going to fix the obesity problem. And honestly, in this day and age, if you decide that you're going to try to put phys ed back into schools, you are going to have just an angry mob with pitchforks and torches and everything else saying, I don't want my child being involved in that because it's dangerous and you can't tell my kid what to do and everything else. So that's never going to end up happening because you're not going to be able to make it mandatory. You're not going to have something that's going to say, okay, well, your child has to be active for this 45-minute period throughout the day. Because parents simply won't do it. If they aren't willing to do it with their own kids when they're home, they're not going to say, well, then, yes, I'm going to force you to do it at school. Because it just simply isn't going to happen. It's not realistic enough. Or realistic, period. Not realistic enough. I don't know why I threw that little qualifier in there, but it's not realistic, period. There was something in there, actually, someone had said that the main reason why we're all fat is because the manufacturing jobs are gone. Didn't make a lot of sense. They tried to explain it by saying that these were all physical jobs, and now we all have desk jobs, and I know people that have desk jobs, and they aren't obese like me. They are a normal, healthy weight because, and part of it is because they are a little bit more active, but the majority of it is that they don't eat the same way that we do. There was a thing in there about the cost of food, which we did talk about yesterday as well, that which is kind of weird because the person that was saying it in the comments, they weren't saying things like, well, the apples and, oats and health foods and everything else. They were actually talking about, things that they had purchased. Saying, well, I bought a bag of potatoes and I bought, a $15 steak and it's, this big and everything else. So, of course, people were replying and saying like, that steak should be lasting you for 3 meals. And I think that sort of gets lost a lot with, and I didn't think of it either when we were looking at the cost of food and things like that. My eyeball's still itchy. It's okay. Pull it out later on, run it under cold water. It'll be good. That when we look at something like that, like steak, for example, or even apples or chicken or whatever it is, when we look at it and say, well, it's ridiculous, it's $15. Yeah, but remember, our portions are 2 or 3 times bigger than they should be. So we need to sort of take that into account as well. Something I did skip over yesterday, which I really should have looked into. Now, again, I'm not sort of saying, well, the person who was bitching about the steak was right, but the person who was criticizing them was right, wasn't right either. These are just all the different opinions that sort of came in, and there are some that I disagree with entirely, like the gym thing. No, bringing gym back into schools is not going to fix the problem. Just forcing people to have, mandatory exercise at work is not the problem. Forcing people to end up doing the manual labor at a job instead of having it automated, which is 10 times better because it's producing things a whole shit ton faster. We aren't going to get into, what's the word I'm looking for? I want to say evolution, and that's not right. Environmental issues. God, I can't think of the word. We aren't going to get into all that because that's a whole other story. But when you look at things like I know that we're sort of destroying everything right now, but when you look at where our life is, or how our lifestyle is at this point compared to how it was 100 years ago when the Industrial Revolution started, then yes, we're all pretty much all better off. So bringing back manual labor jobs is not the key to fixing the obesity problem. I think a lot of it is, part of it is that we don't know. Like a year ago when we started doing this, we had no clue what we were doing. We knew what was bad for us in general. We know that chips are bad and cakes and cookies and all that stuff. We know what's bad for us in general. But, when we looked at the different salads from fast food places, we had no idea just how bad it was. And certain things that we think, these are healthy things, so I can go and I can eat these. Like low-fat cottage cheese. There you go. Perfect example. Well, no, because now they're dumping in twice as much sugar. So, educating people, I think, is going to be a huge part of it. And I think that, but anyway, I don't want to get off on a sort of a preachy thing here. I'm going to try to stay on topic with the story that came out because it really struck me, all the different opinions that people had, and everyone seems to have a solution for it. And, I can imagine that only about half of these people are actually obese or overweight because some of them just have such disdain for obese people that it very obviously comes through in their comments. And we've dealt with that before. We've dealt with that for years and years and years. We've dealt with that since we started doing this. And even, when we start losing weight, we still get stuff from people from time to time that it's not going fast enough, or, it doesn't seem to be good enough for them. So, setting those aside, just reading through the different comments and, the ideas that people have and things like that, none of them seem to really be very practical. And more than anything, none of them simply just said, you know what, the main problem is that it's readily available. We have a tremendous number of psychological issues that go along with it, but it's cheap, it's plentiful, and we don't need to eat healthy. I know that sounds really weird and really bad considering what we've done over the past year, but we don't have to run from predators. We don't have to be, bodybuilders. We don't have to be able to even, walk in general as part of our life. For the vast majority of us, we don't need to do anything. We stay at home. When we want to be entertained, we're sitting down, we're watching TV. When we go to work, we're sitting at a desk, we're watching a computer screen. We don't need to do a whole lot of moving around. And we don't need to fight for our food. We don't need to hunt for it. We don't need to worry about, am I going to have enough energy to get through the day? So I need to be efficient and try to find, what is going to be best for me to eat. In general, our lifestyle lends itself to sitting around, doing nothing, and eating very high fat, high sugar, high calorie foods just 24 hours a day. And we've looked at how, our evolution has sort of pointed us in that direction, where we're going to want to do that. That when we do eat something like that, it's not even a matter of us going, oh, this is so good and I'm full now, so I don't need to worry about what's going to be chasing me or where my next meal is going to come from. But it actually triggers a pleasure center in our brain. So, there's that aspect that we have to deal with, that addiction factor. But everyone seems to have a rough idea thinking this is going to be the one thing that's going to fix the problem across the country, and it simply isn't. I think if we ever are going to fix this, and quite honestly, I don't think we ever will. I don't think this is something that you can look at and say, well, people are going to finally wake up and start fixing the problem. It's like the environmental issues. We've known what's going on literally for over 100 years now, and we simply do nothing. Global warming and climate change was talked about in the 1890s. No one has done a thing since. We simply will not do it. So the argument there is over. Same thing with gun laws down in the States. Your gun laws, you have made up your mind. There is no way in hell that those are ever going to change. The debate needs to stop. Same thing with obesity. The only thing that's going to change, people in general, you can put in the sugar tax, which I think is going to be very good, just for the simple fact that it's very practical and it's going to be offsetting a lot of the costs that we're causing for our healthcare system. But it's not going to change everyone's lifestyle. People aren't going to all of a sudden start being more healthy. The kids aren't going to start being more healthy. You aren't going to see obesity plummet like it should be. Because the only thing that we can do is what we can do for ourselves. That didn't come out right. I'm going to try this one more time. Socially speaking, when you're looking at something like obesity, it's never going to get fixed. We have, 500,000 years of evolution to fight through. We have a lifestyle that lends itself to just being sedentary. We don't need to move around for a whole hell of a lot. We have cheap food that is high in calories and high in fat and sugar and all the stuff that we love. Of course we're going to go after it. The only way that this is going to change is if we change it ourselves. And that is an individual thing. It's not going to be something that is just going to be across the board. It's not going to be a cultural thing. It's not going to be a social thing. It's certainly not going to be a government thing. It's going to be when each person at some point in their life gets to where we got to and says, you know what? I can't keep doing this. I can't sleep. My joints hurt all the time. I can't breathe. I can barely brush my teeth without getting winded. And, half the time I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack just sitting down doing nothing. We have to get to that point ourselves before we're actually going to kick ourselves in the ass and do anything. And although I think that, there are some things that can contribute to it, like the sugar tax and, even if you were to say, yes, put gym back in school and make it not mandatory, but make it something that is an option there. Start funding after-school programs where it's sort of focusing on sport or dance or whatever it is that you want to do. Little things like that you might gather a few people that will start doing that. Yes, fine. That's great. It's going to help. But as far as fixing the problem, I don't think it's something that can be fixable. It's going to be each person individually. They have to make that decision. Like we've seen so many of the other people on YouTube and so many people on MyFitnessPal. It's not a government program that got them started. It wasn't something that, they said, well, when I was a kid, if only I had this option, I would have been able to do this. And now they can do it as an adult. It's none of that. Almost every single case, we've gotten to a point where we can't simply do it anymore. We're tired of how we feel. We're tired of how we look. We're tired of just being sore and sleepy and sweaty all the time. And we don't like our lives the way that they are. And until each person gets to that point, there's nothing that's going to sort of fix the problem. It's nothing that is going, like 100 years from now, it's not going to be something that, well, this program went into play and now everyone is within that normal weight range. We were for a very long time. Right up until, the 70s and 80s when things started getting really, really bad. But it's generally, that's how our life has sort of evolved. Not just evolution, but, socially speaking as well. That's where we're sort of headed. And we are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's going to take each one of us just to say, enough is enough. I can't keep eating entire tubs of icing and expect to, to keep living, basically. Because it does get to a point where eventually you're not. You're not even really, well, I don't want to use that cliche where people go, you're not living, you're surviving. But you really aren't having anything that you would call a life. I certainly wasn't. I got to a point where, and in your head, you convince yourself that you're still enjoying it. I would come home, I would sit in front of the computer, I would play, either video games or watch movies or do something where I didn't have to move and just eat and eat and eat and eat. And I enjoyed it. And of course, we are going to enjoy it. Because we've seen what it does to us, what any addiction will do to you. It doesn't matter how destructive it is. At some point, you're going, this is great. I'm enjoying this. I love this. This is terrific. But it's the aftermath of that we simply couldn't face. So we start eating again and start, eating more. And then, we just nonstop. We know how the cycle goes. I'm not going to go into that either. So, because otherwise it's going to get all mopey and sad. But I think it's going to take each person to get to a point where they sort of have had enough. Whether it's a matter of them getting angry about it and saying, no, enough is enough, I'm going to start joining the gym, and then they go, and that's when they, get their stuff done. Whether it's something that, like with me, it wasn't a matter of, having a moment. It was just, I had a series of moments throughout my entire life that's like, oh, this should have been my wake-up call. Back then should have been my wake-up call, and this moment should be my wake-up call. And it simply wasn't. It was just, I tried over and over and over to lose the weight and finally stumbled across something that helped me stick to it. It has been very, 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 very slow going, but it's still working. I'm still losing. I'm still sticking with it. So that's the main thing. But I think that for all of us, we get to a point where, whether it's out of anger or depression or just, flat out practicality, where we say enough is enough. I can't live this way anymore. I want to improve my lot in life. And I think that is really the only way that this is going to change. I do think, though, that adding things like a sugar tax and, adding in extra programs and a whole, whatever stuff they have, what the YMCA is doing in Regina right now, which we talked about a while ago, where if you get a letter from your doctor, your gym membership is paid for. You get a personal trainer, stuff like that. That's incredibly good. I think it's very, very helpful. And so programs like that, I think, should be great. I'm not a big believer in the fact that the government should just hand stuff to you. A lot of the arguments that were in there were just saying, well, make the government force people to have the fruits and vegetables down to, nothing. So that basically it's very, very affordable, which sounds like a good idea at the time, but do you really want your country's government saying, well, no, we're now putting a cap on what each thing costs, and they could subsidize them, which they already do, through the asshole, or out the yin-yang if you prefer, if you don't like the term asshole. I said asshole 3 times now. Anyway, I think that the programs would be very helpful, but it's not something that I think that the government needs for us to go to the government and say, you need to fix me because I'm too fat. We have made our own choices. We know that. And because of this past year, we've been changing those choices. We've been making better ones. We've started exercising. We've cut way back on the amount of bad food that we're eating, and we've increased the amount of good food. We've cut back just on the amount as well. So we've made these choices, and it has helped us a great deal. And although I do think that there are some programs and some things that the government could do that will help, I think that when it comes right down to it, we're the only ones that are going to be able to change this. And I don't think that it's something that, they can change the food guide, they can try to educate people as much as they want, But at the end of the day, if we aren't bothering to go after that information and find out on our own, if we're still content to be the way that we were, and let's face it, at the time we thought we were, then that's never going to change. So, but it was interesting just to sort of see other people's opinions on the whole thing. Some of it was really, really angry. Some of the people who were somewhat supportive. There wasn't a whole lot of support in general about the study, which is kind of weird. But when you think about it, people tend to get very angry at science in general anyway. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just a fear of not knowing what the hell they're talking about or what. But, I mean, if there was, if more of our money was going towards funding stuff like that, to even if it was just researching obesity or, ways that they can help, even if it was just the psychological aspect of it, I would gladly up my taxes. We pay a tremendous amount of tax in Canada anyway. I would pay more because it would be helpful. And I think in the long run, even if it helps a few people, it doesn't have to help everybody. But if it's out there so that people can actually go and find the information and, seek out that help, then yes, raise my taxes again. I will gladly pay it because I've been there. We all have, where you don't know where to start. You don't know what to do. And if there was a spot out there where you could go and get the help that you need, and not that it's handed to you on a silver platter, but just, didn't mean for that to be a food pun, but just that there was something out there that would help you get started. And so that you can go and say, this is something I don't have to spend, $200 a month on a gym membership for. I don't have to buy an extra $200 or $300 on food for health food every month. I don't have to go and buy the protein powders and the pills and the shakes and all the other stuff that goes into it. If there was something that was out there that the government could say, these are programs that will help you get on track, again, like they're doing in Regina right now. I think that more than anything is going to help a lot of people, because just giving someone that boost is going to help them get started. And we know that once we get that momentum going, how good that feels, and we can keep it going, which hopefully we'll keep doing when the year's up as well. But time will tell. Anyway, I'm going to put a link in the description below, just down to the stories, that you can go and take a look at it. If I can in future, I'm going to try to find the actual report. As of right now, I was not able to find it. I think it still might be a little too early. But if I do find it later on down the road, I'll put it down there as well. So if you do see it down there, chances are it's an update from but I will keep an eye out for it. If I can find the actual report, I'll stick that in there too. But for right now, I'm going to leave this video here. So thank you very much for watching. If you liked it, please poke the like button for me. And in the meantime, keep yourself warm and fuzzy, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.